Hello everyone, Pulse here, and just giving you this little pre-show heads up that the Templar's Toolbox episode is going to be in two parts. They should come consecutively, but due to the overall length of the video, which I didn't even notice until after I completely recorded it and went to edit the thing, how much jibber jabber I apparently did. But just going to give you guys this little heads up here that it is going to be in two parts. So look for the first half to have the first two skill lines, and the second half to have that final skill line, and then my like overview and my thoughts and concerns about the Templar class skill lines as a whole. So thanks for understanding, guys, and enjoy the show. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Delving Deep ESO. Now in today's episode, we're going to continue our little venture to go over all of the skills that are going to be in Elder Scrolls Online, or at least the ones that we should expect at this point. And then for today's episode in particular, we're going to dive in and kind of go swimming around in the vast lake of skills that are related to the Templar class. Now, as I mentioned with the Dragonite video that's come out prior to this one, I would highly suggest taking a look at the class overview video I previously produced. As in with that video, there should be one in the corner, an annotation I should say. So click on that guy and it'll take you over to the class overview video. That way you can get all the details about kind of that basic stuff, and then you can return to this video with all of that knowledge, and we can all be on the same page before jumping into the Templar video. Now before I jump into what the Templar is going to offer us with Elder Scrolls Online, I do want to remind everyone yet again, and I'm going to do this at the beginning of all of these videos that are like this, that this information that I'm going to tell you guys about is not confirmed by Zenimax in any way, really, and it's more of a collective of information that has been quote-unquote confirmed by a substantial number of people around the internet and from multiple sources, be it people that claim to be beta testers or no beta testers, that sort of thing. And I feel like it's an okay thing to cover this information because of what Zenimax showed at QuakeCon. The skills that they did show were essentially an exact mirror of what we had already been shown through leaks and other people kind of talking about their experience. So I feel like it's legit to talk about them, but do take it with a little bit of salt. Especially if I slip up and say exact numbers in terms of like damage or healing or what have you, because the numbers will change regardless if these skills are going to be in the same form or not, because the skills are going to be changed throughout the process of development and then long after the release of Elder Scrolls Online as well. So let's just get right into it. Before I begin, let me just tell everyone I'm going to start with the ultimate abilities because I want to kind of go with the theme that they're spreading across the skill line that they're attached to, and the ultimate abilities really shape the way that the skill lines seem to appear. So I feel like it's okay to start with them. It'll kind of be like the title and then the main theme of the skill line. But for the Templar, the first skill line we will see is called Adric's Spear, and the ultimate ability for this skill line is called Radial Sweep, and it's basically just an AoE that's going to kind of be a short radius around the Templar for an okay amount of magic damage. But what makes it interesting compared to the other ultimates is that instead of being this super powerful skill that you wait forever to use, the Radial Sweep ultimate is going to have a substantially lower ultimate cost, I should say, so that you can use this more frequently, and it kind of gives the player the ability to, instead of taking a ultimate that you can't use very often, you could potentially use that ultimate slot as maybe a sixth skill, so that you can pretty much, you'll just be expanding your repertoire that of skills that you use on a regular basis instead of having ultimates which you use very rarely. And I'm sure we'll see these kinds of ultimates throughout the classes and throughout the skill lines in general. So this allows for a good bit more customization when it comes to what you're going to use in that extra button on the side there. Now let's just get right into the active abilities. The first one we have is called Puncturing Strikes, which is just going to be a very quick channel where the Templar is going to stab multiple times to the enemies in front of them, and then on the last hit is going to do a little knockback. It's just a kind of a basic attack, but it's kind of interesting that a channel is going to be the way to go for this very low level active ability. So that's a pretty cool little spell with your light spears that you're going to be conjuring up throughout most of the spells in this skill line. Now, the next skill we have here is Piercing Javelin. This is just going to cause the Templar to throw a spear across the screen pretty much, quite a good distance, and has a light knockback to it. This is that skill that we've seen throughout the footage, where the character just kind of leans back and hurls this spear of light through the air and then hits a target from quite a distance away. That's what this spell is. The next one we have here is Focused Charge. This is going to be an okay ranged charge ability where the Templar will rush to the target and interrupt them, as well as doing a tiny bit of magic damage. What's interesting about this skill to me is that its costs don't seem very high compared to other skills. And usually the charge abilities in other MMOs have a cooldown or high cost attached to them, so that there's some limiters. In this case, there doesn't seem to be anything quite like that. So the Templars using this skill are going to be pretty mobile around the battlefield, and I actually think that's okay, and that's a pretty cool idea that with this ability you'll just be zooming around the battlefield with your spears in hand and messing people up pretty quickly and switching targets frequently throughout an encounter. Now, the next ability we have here is Spear Shards, and this is a fairly interesting one. It just has a little bit of magic damage on it, and it disorients a target, and you by the looks of things, be able to throw a spear, I imagine, considering the archetype of this whole skill line. And when it lands on the ground, it'll do some magic and disorient, as I mentioned. But what's more interesting is it's going to leave a light spear in the area you threw it, and an ally can actually come along and pick that up, and it will grant you and the person who picked it up both a bonus to damage for a number of seconds. So you could use this skill in quite a lot of ways. You can use it as a very light CC with the disorient there, but you can really use this with some coordination, I feel, and I can see this being used by high-level players and high-skilled players, and kind of using these type of spells that are a little bit quirky, but they can give substantial bonus in very small doses to overcome pretty large obstacles. I can imagine boss fights being won or lost through skills that are kind of in the same theme, where you have a few seconds to act, and maybe you can utilize the bonuses on this to get over the hump. But that's a fairly cool spell in my opinion. Now, the last active ability for this skill line is called Sun Shield. Now, this is a pretty cool ability as well. The idea is you're going to activate the shield, and you're going to be able to absorb a large amount of your max health throughout the 6-second duration. But like I said, the numbers aren't going to matter so much, but I just wanted to mention it there because of the next point, which is when you activate it, it's going to do this pretty close range AoE, right? And then for every enemy you hit, it's going to increase the shield strength by just for example, to make sure that this is pretty clear, the baseline percentage for how much it will absorb is 24%, right? Then for each enemy that you hit, it will grow this amount by 4 more percent. So for every enemy you hit, it is going to grow substantially for the 6-second duration, obviously. And I can see this spell being really, really damn good. Especially if you're well-timed to hit lots of enemies with this. You could become nearly invincible, which is very, very strong, and it kind of brings me to this last point that they add to the skill, and I'm glad they put this little limiting factor on it, and it's that you no longer regenerate magicka while this shield holds, so it's still going to be a very powerful ability. But what they've done is they made it so that you can't build your character in a way that makes him invincible even when he has low health and low magicka, because without this limiter, someone could potentially make a build where they have enough magicka regeneration or ways to get magicka back that would allow them to, say, hit 0 magicka, and then with the spell up, and then while the spell is up, they would regenerate enough magicka to use it again, so they could essentially just use this infinitely, is what that would happen. So I'm glad that they put this no regenerate magicka little extra bit to that, so they players can't quite cheese the skill and cheese the system with stuff like this. So I'm kind of glad that they're paying attention to those little details, which means that they've kind of taken into account some of the balance issues already, and we're not even in an open beta environment. So that's pretty cool, and I have to give props to them for that. Now let me see here. The first passive ability we have for the Templar is Piercing Spear. This is a very basic critical strike damage bonus, but in addition to that, and it seems to be all about the details with Zenimax, especially with the Templar's toolkit. This one also has a little extra on the skill here. In this case, it's going to be extra damage to blocking targets, which it doesn't sound like much, but I can see if you build a Templar really burst damage build, for example, and you're in a PvP environment, and you're fighting a team that is known to use a pretty powerful build which utilizes blocking damage through shields, for example. And your team decides, well, you know, we'll use this bursty Templar build and have him chunk the tank that's got this blocking in his favor. We'll chunk him down much quicker by using a Templar or two utilizing this build to fight him. Because of this extra passive, it gives them a little bit of a leg up when it comes to fighting the blocking tanks. That's a pretty cool little extra there, and it's not game breaking, but it's something that can add a little bit of strategy to it. Now the next ability we have here on the passives list is Spear Wall. This is just going to increase your block amount versus melee attackers, and I should add, it'll block melee attacks by an extra percentage as long as you have a spear themed ability slotted. That's obviously added there, so you can't utilize this passive in a way that gives you an extra bonus to someone who doesn't use spears. So I imagine that's because they probably seen too many people taking this skill and putting it with other builds that had zero spear skills related to it, and it wound up giving them too much tankiness. So I'm okay to see that little extra added onto the bottom there. But the real point of having this skill, in actuality, is with the theme of all the skills that we have here, it would seem like they're trying to give you a couple ways to stay alive, even if you build fairly squishy. But you're in the melee, so they want to give you some tools to stay alive, and this is one of them. Sun Shield was another as well. And then the last passive I'll get to in a minute also adds a little bit more tankiness to you inherently, which is pretty cool. Now the next one is called Burning Light. On this skill, it adds 25 or however much percentage, as I said, it's going to change, on hit for your spear abilities to do extra magic damage. So this is a pretty common sort of mechanic that MMOs use pretty often, which is usually referred to as procs. And essentially what it means is when you hit with an ability, you have a okay percentage to just deal an extra amount of damage on the top. So it's not something you can fully control, but it kind of gives that sense of, well, if I'm lucky or I build around like maybe very fast attacks, you can utilize this proc ability to the most of its like potential. I know a lot of people don't really like procs. I'm okay with them, but I can definitely see, especially from the PvP side of things, where you'd much prefer having full-on control, and vice versa. If you're fighting somebody that has this and you're controlling the battlefield, and then they get lucky with a bunch of these in a row, and that's what tipped the scale in their favor, that can be frustrating for both ends. So I'm okay with it, but I do hope that they don't just oversaturate this game with them, because it kind of raises some concerns for people that really like to have that full-on control of their character, which would really fit the theme of what Elder Scrolls Online is doing with the skill line system. Now, the last passive skill for this skill line is called Balanced Warrior, and as I mentioned, it's going to make you a little bit more tanky, but in this case, it's through adding spell resistance, so that you'll be able to take a couple hits from powerful spells along with some of the melee attacks, and then that combined with Sun Shield and Spear Wall, you're inherently tanky in the front line. But in addition to that, you're also going to get a nice boost to your weapon power as well. And it's a fairly bland passive, but it's one that's also very powerful, so I'm okay with it being in the high level, and that seems to be kind of the theme that Zenimax was going for, to maybe incentivize going deep into these skill lines. So you'll get maybe not the most intriguing or interesting skill, but you'll get some that are fairly powerful and ones that you can guarantee are going to give you bonuses. Now, when I look over this whole list that I've already gone over, I have to say this is a very interesting list of skills. There's a nice mix of attack and defense going on, and it's just a fairly well-rounded set. You have nice staying power, as I kind of mentioned, with Sun Shield, combined with Balanced Warrior and Spear Wall. You have some chasing skills with the Focus Charge ability, and since it doesn't seem to have a really high cost, you'll be really zooming around the battlefield, as I kind of mentioned. Alongside that, you have some nice CC with some disorients and some knockbacks. And when I really piece it all together, it looks like if you kind of focus on the skill line, you'll be playing something along the lines of knocking people around a whole bunch and then chasing them down and getting right back in their face and then knocking them back and knocking them around and then getting back in their face again. And you'll just be kind of unleashing this almost brutal style of just kicking their ass around the battlefield, really. And I can imagine players that like this fast-paced and hectic melee environment really enjoying this, and I actually think it sounds like a lot of fun being able to just charge around constantly and beating the shit out of people and knocking them down, knocking them out. That sounds like a lot of fun, and it's pretty appealing to me. So let's get on to the next one, though. We have the Dawn's Wrath skill line. Now, this skill line starts out with the ultimate ability, Nova. And if you haven't noticed by my name or by the channel art or any of that, I'm a fan of the Supernova. So this is a pretty cool skill. But what it does is it's got a pretty substantial range on it. Unlike the Adric Spear ability, this costs a ton of ultimate, but for good reason, because for a good number of seconds, enemies that are hit by this, and it doesn't say that there's a linger to it, but by the way that this is worded throughout, it seems to be that there will probably be this lingering AoE going on. But it says that enemies will deal a huge amount of damage, or they'll take a huge amount of damage reduction in terms of what they can dish out. So they'll be dealing a significant amount less than they usually would. They're going to take some magic damage for the duration of this, as long as they stand in it, I would imagine. But on top of all that, you're also going to have an active synergy ability called Supernova tied to this. So when an ally hits that ability, it's going to deal significant damage and then stun all of the enemies in the area. And all three of these combined are just pretty ridiculous, in my opinion. But by comparison to other MMOs, just to give you a sense of how strong it is, they say 70% less damage for 8 seconds is a long time. So even though those numbers will probably change, the fact is that compared to other MMOs, that is ludicrously long amount of time, and even more importantly, a huge amount of damage reduction. And then you have the ability to stun on top of that. That's just really potent. And it's got to be one of the more powerful ultimates that I've seen so far. But before I gush on about the ability to use a Supernova in ESO, let's move on to the active abilities, shall we? The first one we have here is called Sunfire. This is just going to deal a little bit of magic damage, and then it's going to have a small dot at the end of it as well. But it's also, with that, going to have a slight snare to it. This seems fairly bland, but I have to say I'm a fan of this snare on what would, I guess, be a level 1 or very early level spell, because this spell seems to fit in the kind of spell slinger style play style, I should say. Goodness, slurring words very badly right now. But the idea is that in the low levels, such play styles as like a ranged mage or caster usually has trouble keeping mobs off of them long enough to kill them in the very early levels. So the ability to kite right from the get-go when you achieve this spell is a pretty appealing and nice little extra there. That way, even if you're low level and you haven't quite gotten the toolkit required for your long-range combat to be successful right from the beginning of the game, you'll have the ability to kite around a little bit, and that'll both give you the skill to kite later in the game when it becomes more important in high-end content, but also give you the survivability that you'll need right from the get-go. So that's a nice little extra for Sunfire. Now the next ability on the list here is called Solar Flare. This is going to be another ranged ability where you're just going to deal some magic damage to your target. But in addition to that, when it hits the target, it's going to kind of explode in a small radius around and hit all of the nearby enemies. But the most important part about this is that your affected targets hit by the initial spell and the small little explosion that comes with it, they're all going to take an additional 40% damage. Now, as I keep saying, the numbers will change, but that's a significant boost to your next attack. And I can really foresee this being a skill which kind of shapes your rotation of sorts, or your playstyle as a whole. If you utilize Solar Flare effectively, the idea would be, in my eyes, is to have this up on priority targets as much as possible, and it could really give you burst damage like no other. It just seems like a really powerful skill, and I imagine it's one of those that will be used in high-end content for Templars, especially of the DPS variety. I can foresee this being a skill that'll kind of be mandatory, in my opinion. Actually, it just seems that powerful. Now, the next skill on the list here, though, is Backlash. This is a fairly interesting one. The idea is for a couple seconds after activating, you're going to store up any damage which you take. So your health bar will deplenish. It's not a defensive ability, but what will happen is all of the health that you've lost will, at the end of the Backlash's sort of buff that it's going to put on you, when that dissipates, you're going to hit all nearby enemies for the full amount of damage that you took from all sources, by the looks of things. And then on top of that, you're going to deal about a third of that total damage in extra. So you're going to deal all of the damage you took and then some. This is a pretty cool ability, and one I feel will probably be utilized with like high-end content where the character's about to take damage that cannot be blocked, and especially in AoE situations, you run in, you pop Backlash, you tell your healers, heal me up a little bit extra during this because I'm going to take damage like I usually don't, and then I'm going to get tons of aggro on all of these guys. I'm going to deal significant damage to all these guys, and then you can just heal me up after that's gone. It seems like a fairly interesting ability. Its magicka cost is pretty high, so I'd have to imagine it's as at least as potent as I think it's going to be, considering that's the number we're given. Now, the next one here is Eclipse, and this is another powerful ability, and that seems to be the trend with this the class in general, really. This is going to be a reflection skill where you can put Eclipse on a target, and for 5 seconds, that character will not be able to cast negative spells on you or anyone else because they will be reflected right back at them. They've made sure to add that subsequent casts are going to cost substantial more mana, or magicka rather. Oh, please don't kill me for that. But they're going to cost a good bit more magicka to use, so you won't be able to spam this on a whole crowd of people and keep yourself from being hit, and more importantly, them just pretty much blocked from using spells, really. This is one of those that is going to be really essential, I feel, in both PvP and PvE. I kind of mentioned this in the Dragon Knight video, that Reflect is one of those things that they seem boring. Like, if you're just soloing, it's boring. But they are skills that usually have a place where maybe it's rare usage, but it's just super potent and super powerful that there's something that you're going to want all the time. I imagine that Eclipse is going to be a skill that, or at least skills very similar to this, where you can put said Reflect of single target spells onto a mob that's really powerful, or even more importantly in PvP, you can block very powerful spells from your opponents. When you can use this ability to block them out of their really powerful spells that they're going to use to burst someone down, that can give you a substantial bonus. So that's a really potent skill. So I imagine to see that get a lot of usage in all forms of gameplay, really. Now, the last active ability for this skill line is called Blinding Light. This is going to be a small AoE that's going to happen around you. And what it's going to do is it's going to cause all enemies for a couple of seconds to miss all of their attacks, while also having a pretty high chance of getting set off balance when they miss their attack. So this is a pretty defensive ability compared to the rest, but I can actually see this being used in conjunction with Backlash, where you'll run in, Backlash, get a lot of damage on you. Your healers will keep you up as best they can, and then if the enemies are lived through the Backlash, kind of dishing out tons of damage, you can throw on the Blinding Light, and they'll just all miss for a couple seconds, and then your healers can get you back up to the top, and you can kind of use this in rotation to do a significant amount of AoE damage as a tank, for example. So that's a pretty cool ability. I feel like it will gel well with other tanking skills especially. Now onto the passives. The first one we have is called Enduring Rays. This is going to increase the duration of all of your sun abilities by a couple seconds. So it's pretty bland, but it's powerful and it's low level. So I feel like that's kind of a filler thing actually, but it's fine. I'm okay with it. The next one is called Prism. This one is pretty interesting. What it's going to do is every time you activate a sun-based ability, you're going to get extra ultimate. So you get this ability, the ultimate, through playing well in the finesse system, and I've gone over this in previous videos. And the idea is when you play well and you dodge and you interrupt, and just the idea is skillful play, you're going to get ultimate. But then you have a skill like Prism come along where you're going to be able to get ultimate built up just by playing normally, not really doing anything out of the ordinary or skillful. You can just get this ultimate through using your skill bar. I feel like it's a really powerful skill actually, if the ultimates turn out to be as powerful as like Nova would seem to be. So we'll see how an ability like that pans out. Hopefully the amount of ultimate you get back is not enough to maybe offset some of the others, so that you don't always pick this skill over others, but we'll see what happens in time. Now the next ability we have is called Illuminate. This is just going to cause enemies to deal a good bit less damage to you if they're affected by your sun abilities. This is another one of those defensive skills that's kind of mixed in, and it really, as you get through the passive, it really seems to be that Dawn's Wrath is a pretty good balance of attack, defense, and CC support. It's a nice mixed bag of skills here in this skill line. Now the last passive skill we have for Dawn's Wrath is called Restoring Spirit, and this is going to cause Magicka to regain a nice chunk when activating an ability. This seems very powerful. Just to kind of let you guys know what I mean by this is, they say 4% of your max Magicka. That is a pretty large amount, considering that pretty much with if you just like run through your skill bar one time, you'll have almost a quarter of your Magicka back without any, like, that's not including passive Magicka gain or anything. So the thing is with this, they don't even say that it's a sun-based ability that has to be used. I'm curious to see how that one's going to turn out. I wouldn't be surprised at all if this passive gets nerfed from its current form to a level where, because with this passive, I have to say, I feel like the Templars are going to use this, especially in a healing role or a spellcaster role, because you just never run out of Magicka. That seems crazy to me. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. Now, I kind of mentioned as I was going through this, but the skill line, it's fairly cool. And it has this nice mix of range damage dealer and support and CCs and some defensive abilities as well. And compared to Adric's Spear and the skills that are in that skill line, it's a good bit more balanced, and looks to me like a set of skills that will probably be utilized across multiple playstyles, where the Adric's Spear was a lot more focused, in my opinion. Now, when I give this some thought, I kind of imagine this skill set will pull in multiple playstyles with ranged magic archetypes from like the Sunfire, as I mentioned earlier, but people that like to play support in a non-traditional way will probably go this way. But what I really foresee happening is this is going to be the skill line which gets ripped apart. I imagine this isn't going to be something that a lot of players utilize in a very focused way, like they go all the way to the end and they don't hybrid very much, because this, even though this would give you, I suppose this would give a player the ability to kind of fill all roles at once, and I guess there's going to be people that want to do the jack of all trades kind of thing, but compared to, like, if you're wanting to do hardcore content, I just don't foresee it being this unfocused, so I really foresee the abilities being picked off of this and then placed into other skill sets, and then utilizing the abilities in that way. Because unlike Adric's Spear, there doesn't seem to be this overarching theme of, like, you need to have this spear skills or anything like that. It's very unconnected, but the skills by themselves are really strong. So I expect these will be kind of picked apart and placed into other skill sets, as I mentioned. So I'm looking forward to see how well that goes. And maybe they'll tweak it so this becomes a little bit more focused. And people that want to play the jack of all trades, maybe they will stick to the skill line as a whole. Now, there is one thing before I go on to the next skill line, though, that I almost forgot, and it's that with the Prism thing and the potency of Nova in its current form, I'm curious to see how people can build to gain ultimate back as quickly as possible, and I'm curious to see, because I know that what they're going for with the Adric Spear ultimate and Adric Sweep is that they want you to use it regularly. I'm curious is if an ability like Prism, and if you can maybe even stack such abilities, maybe there's different ones through your actives as well. You can get extra ultimate if you play very well. If you can get to a point where you can use a spell as strong and as powerful as Nova on a regular basis, I want to see if this is something that will happen, especially when beta comes along. I really want to see if in group play you can just whip out these really expensive ultimates for not so long of a wait that they're probably hoping for. So we'll see how that gets tweaked in the future. I'm really curious to see how the player base utilizes skills which build ultimate quickly. So we'll see what happens there. But let's get on to the last one here. Okay guys, that'll do it for the first half. This is where I've decided to cut it. It's a little bit past the halfway mark, but as I said at the beginning, the second half will have that third skill line, and then you'll also have the kind of overview and my thoughts on the class skill lines in their current condition. So thanks for watching guys, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.